Hi everyone, welcome to Room and Board. My name's Chris George and I am Kickstarter addict. It's been 10 days since my last Kickstarter purchase. I was on such a streak, I thought I kicked it, no pun intended. But sometimes you want beautiful things and you abandon all restraint and have to pick yourself up from the pieces, like the broken and beautiful mosaic that you are. So we'll see if I can put myself into temptation once again and emerge unscathed. But before we get into the games, first off, shout out to all my patrons. New patron shout out. Good. And now shout out to my existing patrons. Thank you so much again for your continued support of the channel. I just have so much fun with you over there on Patreon and on Discord. And just imagine all the fun you could be having if you were over there too. If you find you watch the channel a lot and you want to throw me a couple bucks, sure, links in the description. If not, I'll be here every week regardless. Anyway, let's get right into the games, because we've got a big week. It's actually not a very good week for games. I'll tell you that right up front. But it is a good week for nonsense and indignation, which I will have in spades. And speaking of that, let's start off with bad boys and wicked women. And you know I wasn't going to cover this. I clicked on this solely because of the joke that I just wanted to say. Bad boys and wicked women. Joke over. Let's move on to the next one. Actually, not moving on. This attractive thumbnail aside, which looks like it could be a room and board thumbnail, let's be honest. Half bad boy, half wicked woman on a crimson backdrop. This devious little creature coming into your homes. Feels like it was made for me. But this is actually the Oracle RPG magazine, issue 23, Villains, which looks legitimately cool, which I was certainly not expecting from that sort of title. The topics that they say they're going to cover in this issue of the magazine is what makes a good villain examine, unusual river crossings with the Archer version of Childish Gambino, and it'll also introduce some new NPCs. Don't trust them, and I'm glad they specified not to trust them, because I absolutely would have. He seems like a very trustworthy character with nothing malevolent going on whatsoever. And then finally, they will delve into some locations of the windmills and the lowlands. And honestly, these all sound, I mean, unusual river crossings aside, these all sound like interesting articles that I think would be cool. I think the premise of this magazine is actually to provide these extra NPCs that you can throw in and do like a little bit more of a deep dive into some other topics and about RPG creation. So if that interests you, legitimately, check it out. I never thought I would be saying that about bad boys and wicked women. Now, I might be biased because I am a wicked bad boy myself, but it seems okay in the PDF, £7 or £12 Canadian. So if you're interested in RPGs, I think legitimately check this out. That finishes tomorrow, May 31st at 5 p.m. Now, next up we have Household, which is a tiny RPG, at least in setting, but certainly not in scale, by the Emmy Award winners, which I don't know what that means, but it sounds like Emmy, so it's probably impressive, of The Broken Compass. And I have to talk about this because somebody mentioned it in the comments last week, saying that they were excited about it, and I have to talk about it more and more so that I can entice you with all the pretty pictures that are flashing by on the screen, and tantalize you so significantly that you realize that you want it desperately, even though you don't really play RPGs. I know. I'm just a wicked bad boy. And I can already tell you that that photo is definitely going into my ongoing bits folder on the computer and will make an appearance quite frequently on this channel. But what to say about Household? It is Honey, I Shrunk the Humphrey Bogarts and Sprites, the RPG. And the premise of Household is that it is an RPG about the littlings, who are little folk having a tiny grand adventure, and other oxymorons, in a big abandoned house set in the Regency era, 100 years after the disappearance of the Master. And I love that this mansion is the world that you will get to explore in Household. That's the world. And each faction that you can be one of 4 factions, they control a different area of the world. So the fairies rule the dining room, and the slough, pretty sure I'm pronouncing that right, they rule the basement and are less susceptible to poisons, obviously. The sprites rule upstairs, because of course they do, and the Bogarts are in the living room because that's where all the books are, writing tales about their heroic deeds of the past. And this setting is honestly super cool. RPGs have been knocking it out of the park lately. The system here is based on the fortune system, where basically you're going to roll a set of customized dice and you have to match symbols in order to pass a check. So you're going to try to roll more dice because then your chance of matching the symbols is higher than if you just roll 2. Obviously. Anyway, this one's $30 US or 39 Canadian for the PDF. And to be fair, it can't top the fantastic heights of Brindlewood Bay from last week, but honestly, nothing can. But if you like RPGs and you're looking for a unique world and one that looks fantastic and will get your imagination going, this one also looks really cool. So you might want to check that out. What is slightly annoying about this pledge is that you have to pledge at the $150 level US if you want to get access to any of their stretch goals. When they have a physical copy of the main book for $60 US, I just think they should have thrown the stretch goals in there as well. Don't upsell people so much. It still costs you $60 plus shipping for just the one physical copy of a book. That's a little disappointing. But the world still looks fun, so if you are interested, that finishes Wednesday, June 1st at 9 p.m. Now, next up, we have Crazy Horses, or as I like to call it, another horseable racing game. Better or worse than Lady Gaga? I know, obviously worse, that was the peak of this channel. And this game touts 9 racing games in one box, because why make one mediocre racing game when you can make 9 of them? Hey, it sure worked for 504! And I don't feel bad whatsoever about being mean on this one, because they are asking an appalling £80 or $130 Canadian for this game that is just, well, has at least one thing in common with horses, is horse adjacent, I'd say. Adjacent, that is a good term. I should remember that one. And I think you can tell the exact quality of a Kickstarter when the main video is just people making zany faces and drinking versus actual parts of the game. I had a stressful drive home this weekend. And I am taking out my anger on Crazy Horses, and I am sorry, but I'm not. Because the little horse tracks drew me in. They did. I think they look so cool. They're cute, they're fun, great, but this is the most overpriced drinking game I have ever seen. And I know you can play it for points, but I think they're very clear that the preferred way to play it is for either a tasty treat or a yucky sip. So of course, if you're a wicked bad boy like me, you're obviously only interested in that option.
Did someone say tasty treat or yucky sip?
You know what? Honestly, I'm surprised it took you this long to show up, Slippery.
It's like they made this campaign just for little old me.
Now, let me get this. Is it Slippery Jim approved?
Absolutely. I'll take 20. Giddy up, cowboys.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, what did you expect when the horses play like Slippery Jim's favorite Christmas carol?
We got Pappy and Blondie and Sexy and Windy, Blondie and Furious, Smoky and Peepers. Forget Sleepy, just recall the tastiest racehorse of them.
Enough of that. If for some inexplicable reason you're interested, that finishes Thursday, June 2nd at 9:34 a.m. Let's move on to something with a rulebook for me to read. And that is The Flood. I told you what this week was going to be like. No, but The Flood, I was actually excited for this one. You're building an ark before anyone else can build an ark, so only you can sail off to safety and let those other pieces of garbage drown, even though you clearly all received a vision and believe that you should build an ark to save mankind. Probably doesn't matter. That's right, only one of you gets to survive. In this twist on the classic God murdering everyone story, now he murders everyone in a Hunger Games style game. But mechanically, it's basically Catan. If Catan was reminding you the whole time that you are all sinners and don't deserve to be saved. Because you'll roll the dice and it'll show a tool type, and anybody who's touching that tool type gets to draw the resource cards of the land that the tool type is attached to. So I guess it's not like Catan, because in Catan you roll numbers, and here you roll symbols. Completely different. Then on your turn you can build something, or you can trade with people around the table. You can't do both, again, different. Or you can even move your mammoth around. See, Catan doesn't even have mammoths. And plus, in Catan, where you can only place your settlements down if they're 2 spaces away from another person's settlement, here you can only play your huts, camps, and arcs if they're 3 spaces away from anybody else. I mean, the differences here are I've just listed them. And I'm kind of exaggerating because there are different buildings here, and when you build them, they do different things. But if you like Catan and you wanted something very similar with a twist on it, I think this is one to absolutely check out. If you don't like Catan, well then move along, sinner. This game isn't for you. You deserve to be drowned in the flood. I keep bringing up the sinner aspect because there are sin cards mixed in with the development cards basically that you're going to be drawing. And every time you draw a sin card, well that, can push the flood in closer and closer and engulf the land. But it's also kind of a cool mechanic too because you have to wait for part of it to be flooded before you can actually get the water resource, which you will need for other things. So this one's $55 US, $70 Canadian, plus shipping puts it into that weird realm. But also, if you are interested in getting this, they have a deluxe pledge for $85, which I don't think you should get. You should just get the base pledge and then add on the Beast module for $20 and save yourself $10 because I don't think the Arc minis are really worth $10. And you may want the extra beasts because getting more beasts on the board, they give you different abilities and stuff like that. That feels like the better value version for me if you are interested. And you have until Thursday at 10 a.m. to decide. Now, next up we have Iconic. And this is, again, not a board game. It's a board game beneficiary. And there's not too much I really want to mention here, but it is another RPG system, and it won't be the last one on this list. It feels like I'm only covering RPGs this week, but I'm generally covering them because they look interesting, or more interesting than the board games. And this is cool because it's trying to build deck building to an RPG. So instead of dice, you'll use your deck. The Dungeon Master will play a card and it'll have a number of different symbols on it, and you have to match those symbols with cards in your hand to slay the dragon or whatever. And the other unique thing is that everything only has one hit point. That's it. You kill them or you don't. And this is also kind of a cool campaign because if you jump on board now, they'll give you the PDF rules, and then you will have the option to purchase pretty much everything, the decks of cards, at cost later on. Because this is just to get the art for the game. I'm not sure why they couldn't use the art that they contemplated using in their video. I think that looks incredible and should be part of the game. But I also think that this is a really intriguing model, that you are trying to get people to jump on board right now, and then for the early supporters who are helping this, you just get everything at cost. And I wonder if more Kickstarters could do that. Sell it at cost with a donation bar above. Really be open about how much everything does cost and what the margins are. I don't know, I think that would be interesting. I think it would also get into trouble because ideally you want to pay for design time and you can't necessarily measure that on a specific level. But I wonder if a game would do better or worse. Probably worse. Let's be real. Nobody wants to pay for anything. I certainly don't. But if I know I'm getting something at cost and everything else goes to the creator, perhaps depending upon my level of excitement for that game, it might encourage me to donate more. I don't know. Kind of an interesting question, though, that this made me think of. As well as the excitement that people are trying to innovate with the deck building genre and putting it into role-playing games, which I don't know of anything that has attempted that before. And to meld these genres on the RPG side, that feels kind of cool. I don't think it, as it is right now, looks that great particularly, and I don't think we're quite ready to veer off the well-trod path that the dice rolling has established with this particular instance, but I still wanted to talk about it. Or maybe we are. Maybe this will be the new pioneer. Like all my exes tell me, I'm just afraid of change. That finishes June 2nd at 12:02 p.m. Next on the nonsense list for this week, there is too much nonsense. I'm sorry. I'm sorry this week is filled with nonsense, and I could have saved us both quite a lot of time if I had just decided not to talk about them, but these games or these campaigns just bring so much that I need to share, and that I need to talk to somebody about. And our next one is just that, of course, the Chocolate Egg RPG. Again with the RPG, it's a D&D Kinder Surprise. That's the pitch. And this isn't funding. This has raised just over $200. And maybe that's because people don't want to have to wait a year for their Easter eggs to go stale and turn into the solid equivalent of what I can only describe as a yucky sip. Or maybe it's because it is $42 for one chocolate egg. More specifically, $42 for a 70% dark chocolate egg. And that might seem like a lot. And if that does seem like a lot, well, I assume it's because you've forgotten what all of my exes seem to forget. It's what's on the inside that counts. So it's random what you get. And so you might get a set of dice in this giant chocolate egg. I don't even know if it's giant or not. You might get a grid or a map, or you might get a 3D printed figure. I mean, obviously you want the dice, but maybe you just get one dice and you need to get 6 other dice in order to get a full set and hope that you do. I don't know. I mean, again, hey, it's a fun concept that it's just not gonna happen. But it finishes Thursday at 1:42 p.m. Let's move on to another RPG on the list. I don't know what I was thinking. Well, I do know what I was thinking. I was thinking, oh my gosh, all these games are awful and you have to put out a Monday show. So I appreciate you being here. But actually, here's one that doesn't look awful. This is kind of breaking the trend. It's still not a board game. It's another RPG. This is called Tales from the Gods. And this is a solo journaling RPG, which again, I haven't really heard of. But I'm not that heavily invested in the RPG genre. But you will play a god over the course of your lifespan. This is based off the same system as 1,000-year-old vampires. So I'm assuming your god lives for something kind of like 1,000 years, but I'm not too sure. And as a god, you get to choose how to inspire your followers. Do you give them a beautiful land filled with opulence and prosperity? Or do you drown them all in a raging flood? You get to decide. Both options are equally valid. But what I thought was actually really cool about this premise is that your god's abilities are directly influenced by your followers. Whatever your followers believe your god can accomplish, that is how you get those new powers. It is through their belief that you are created. And this is actually the plotline almost to Neil Gaiman's American Gods, which is an exceptional book. It's probably my most recommended book of all time. And where these new gods are having a fight with old gods, and these new gods have been created because of how much we worship technology. So there would be like a YouTube god or an internet god because we all devote our attention to that thing. There's obviously a room and board god out there too, right? But that's how they gain their statistics, and that's the system at how this game progresses moving along. And it seems cool. This was also something that I wasn't planning on covering. I in my initial stages of research for every Monday video, I go through Kickstarter, I look at the end date of all the titles, and I open up in tabs anything that looks like it could be remotely interesting. And then I parse through them and see if there is anything interesting to talk about, in which case then I bring them forward to you all. And I did a lot of RPGs already, and interesting could just mean me making a funny joke about it, in which case, yes, of course it makes the list. But this one I think is actually genuinely interesting, and I bring it forward because it is a solo RPG, and specifically I know a lot of my patrons are really into solo gaming. Shout out to Dan Marino's comment in the board game giveaway that I wish was picked and wasn't. And that's also why I wanted to mention that it exists, in case this sounds like something interesting that all you solo gamers would want to check it out. What put me over the edge in terms of really wanting to mention this and not just dropping it in the Discord or whatever, is I think it's also really cool what they're doing with their tiers. They have a lowest tier for $13 Canadian. They say, hey, listen, if you are poor and you don't have a lot of money, but you are interested in this thing, this is a discounted copy. And anybody who pledges at a higher tier will add more discounted tiers to the mix so that people can pledge here if they are really interested in the game and they don't feel like they can afford it. I think this is so friggin' classy. I think this is so cool, so awesome, and it makes me want to give this campaign a shout out because they're being wicked. They're supporting people who may not have access to it or may not have the funds right now. And obviously the mandate of this channel, that touches my heart, and I appreciate them doing it. And that's what really clinched me wanting to talk about it as well. It's cool. It's awesome. It just feels like people helping people, and it gets me all warm and fuzzy inside. And they also have a really awesome free preview of the game that you can download, and you can get a sense of the system and see if it is right for you and see if it is something you want to continue with. Or if you think, yeah, it's fine, and then move on. Really well explained. So go check that out if the concept seems to appeal to you of this solo journaling RPG. And the plus side about having a solo RPG is that you've got your entire group in the palm of your hand. You don't have to wrangle people or organize a group that just bails on you. You can really experience the last thing all of my exes say to me at the end of the relationship is that, hey, you're better off alone, you wicked bad boy. Weird coincidence that all of them say that. It's just coincidence, probably. Probably just coincidence. Anyway, if you're interested in that finishes on Thursday, June 2nd at 7 p.m. Next up, we have Left Unsupervised, which is another funny card game. Funny card game alert! Honestly, I'm not talking about it. I'm just bringing it up so that we hit our quota, and that's it. Let's move on. I've wasted enough of your time already. I'm so sorry. This game takes the formula of Cards Against Humanity and it makes it worse. I guess I'm talking about it now. Jeez. That's what I get for wanting the air horn. Look at what you've done to me. I'm a slave to the air horn. You pick someone around the table. You say, oh, fill in the blank. And then you say, here's the ending. But all of their endings are so inane. And legitimately, probably the reason I'm leaving it in here, one of their examples on the campaign page, it finishes with Brad blank because bad decisions make good stories. And that was legitimately in the Hallmark card my parents gave to my grandma this past weekend for her birthday. They're just ripping messages out of Hallmark cards. Overused platitudes that mean nothing. And that's what makes this game not funny, is because, or even less funny than Cards Against Humanity. I can't even believe I'm putting Cards Against Humanity on this pedestal. Because you know what doesn't make a good story? Vagaries. This is why Cards Against Humanity and Mad Libs work, because they have short juxtaposition instead of, and then they walked home sadly, because karma's something that would get me demonetized. Oh, I'm sorry. Just stop it. I'm fired up right now, and I'm sorry. It's just I never thought I'd see a game in the funny card game genre that shows why Cards Against Humanity is the thing to aspire to in that genre. You heard it here first. So real talk, if you're backing this game or you were excited about this game, there are so many other games that do this but better. I think that is where this anger comes from, and I hope you find those games and you enjoy them significantly. Let's finally move on to a game that I think does look good. It's taken us this long. No, it hasn't. There are games that do look good. This is just a board game specific that I think looks good. And since this is more of a board game channel than an RPG channel, it just feels like it's taken me a long time to get here. And so if you're still here, if you haven't unsubscribed, I appreciate you. I shouldn't even release this. Oh, we'll make it work in the editing bay. But Resist is a solo board game. Now you're going to play as the Spanish Maquis, or Maquis, if you're nasty, and try to take out the forces that are threatening your country. And you're going to do this by first drafting a hand of spies who have a hidden side and a revealed side. And on your turn, you can choose to play the card for its hidden side and get its ability and strength, put that towards the enemy that you're facing, or you can play it on its revealed side. And it's usually a greater strength and a better action. But the thing is, if you play it on the hidden side, you get to collect those cards back into your hand and deck at the end of the round. If you play it on the revealed side, well, their cover's blown. They gotta go live in Canada under the name Chris George. And no, forget that last part. And so they just go aside into the revealed deck. And you can sometimes bring these people back with various actions, but often you can't. And then you're gonna work your way through a series of random missions until you reach the end and win, or your loss condition happens. And you lose if you lose 2 missions, you fail 2 missions, you have too many civilian casualties, or you draw a hand of spies, and not your spies, the bad spies, in which case they've been added to your deck and you've been infiltrated too much, and so you lose the game. The resistance fails. And this is €20 or $27 Canadian. And it gives you the game and a digital art book, which I guess that they're showing the digital art book on GameFound just to say, hey, look at the stuff you get. It just adds value. But as somebody who doesn't really care about art books whatsoever, not saying that the art isn't great in this game, I think it is perfectly fitting. But what am I going to do with a digital art book? Someone like me, I generally look, okay, where is the cheaper pledge? And then when there isn't one, I think, well, why am I paying for this thing that I don't want? I think they could just say, and stretch goals, because people understand that and will say, oh, well, look, I get a digital art book for free. And it'll convey that sentiment a little bit more. But it's a good price point. And if you live in Spain, it's great shipping, €3 to Spain. It's €11 shipping to Canada, so it works out to be about $42 for me after conversion. And I am really intrigued by this as a game. And if I played solo games, that probably wouldn't be too much for me for this thing. Honestly, I think the system looks really cool. So if you are interested, check that out. That finishes Friday, June 3rd at 6 a.m. over on GameFound. Now next up, we have an expansion to the Artemis Project, Satellites and Commanders. And first off, this campaign's killing it in terms of comedy, because they've got a big thing on their picture that says, funded in 12 parsecs. And I think that's so funny. So many campaigns put funded in 7 minutes, funded in 4 hours, and like, it really does mean nothing. It just means, hey, our marketing team is getting a raise because enough people were here at the beginning. Well, it doesn't mean nothing. It means people are actively excited to back at that moment in time. Right as it launches, they've set their clock. They're trying to be backer number 1. And that shows excitement and dedication. So I guess it means something. But I just think funded in 12 parsecs is the best one of those that I've ever seen. And congratulations to you, Artemis Project. You really did well. And continuing on that trend in terms of really doing well, this is one of the most succinct Kickstarter videos I have ever seen, because I've yet to play or even look at the Artemis Project, and so I didn't know how it was played. And so I was thinking, okay, cool, I'm going to need to learn the game and then read through the expansion rules as well in order to get a sense of this thing and what is being offered and the implications of it. This video is so good at explaining it. I don't know who did it, but they should be hired for every campaign moving forward. And this is a dice placement game, like kind of a worker placement, but you have dice instead. And coming off the heels of Castles of Burgundy, the dice drafting kind of placement, not really placement, but that fervor being at sort of an all-time high right now, I think you should check out Artemis Project, just the base game, honestly, because this Kickstarter video is that good. And maybe it's just because this game also looks like it's really up my alley, and by that I mean nobody will play it with me because it could end up being too mean. The core mechanics of the game are you're going to put a dice in a spot on the board, and then people can put a certain number of dice in that spot, and then those dice resolve from left to right. So they resolve with the lowest number first, and they finish with the highest number. But the thing is, you get to do more with a higher number, but often these spots are about taking resources, and so you get less with a lower number, but you guaranteed get something, because if they're all out by the time you get to the higher numbers, well, those people don't get anything. And so you're going to take these resources to build buildings with them and get points. Very simple premise. There's just a lot of different places you can go to, obviously different ways to interact with the board. But that concept of putting that die just lower and taking the resources of somebody who's already committed their resources in one spot, it feels really neat. And so this expansion, well, if you know Artemis Project, you probably have already looked into this thing, but this adds 2 extra modules, the Satellites and the Commanders expansion. The Satellites seems pretty basic. You have an extra spot now that kind of rotates around the board and does different things depending on where it is in the rotation. Sure, but the Commanders feel incredibly significant to the gameplay, or incredibly valuable to get while you're playing, because you can upgrade your regular little workers with Commanders, and then when you place a dice down, you can add a Commander, and the dice gets increased in value by 2, but it stays in the same place of its resolution order. So a 1 suddenly becomes a 3, and maybe you can snatch those resources a little bit more than you might have with the 1. That feels like a huge change, and it makes me so excited about the implications of that change. So if you have Artemis Project, you can get this expansion for $30 US. If you don't have Artemis Project, they're trying to sell it to you with the expansion for $99 US, plus an additional $25 US shipping. And when I can get the base game at my local stores for $50 Canadian instead of that $95 Canadian, that makes me think that I'm not interested in backing this campaign, and that I will be actively looking for a copy of this game on the secondhand market or when it gets restocked. Because this is also the 2nd edition. There have been a couple of changes implemented, just balance changes that they've now figured out, which if you're a previous backer, you will get an upgrade pack if you get the expansion. They'll send it along with that, which I think is great. That's the right thing to do. Give your previous backers an upgrade pack instead of making them pay for it. But yeah, it looks cool. really looks cool, and I am legitimate that I will be actively looking for a copy on the secondhand market or when it gets restocked, because it's currently sold out, but I think that is because it was the first edition and it will probably be in retail with this second edition. It's just a new print run, so they're going to have more copies sent out to retailers, and then there will be more copies available for all of you. But if you're worried about that, because Kickstarter often preys on this, you better secure your game now so that we get more of a cut. Well, call your local retail store and see if they will get it in for you. And then you don't have to worry about the shipping. Anyway, that also finishes June 3rd at 9:59 p.m. Now, next up, we have a little roll and write called Brand New Zoo. And this roll and write reminds me a little bit of Dinosaur Island Roar and Write, which is an incredibly favorable comparison because that is my favorite roll and write of all time, and I should do a review about it because I really, really like that game. It's fantastic. But the basic premise of this one is you're going to roll 2 dice and then everybody uses both dice individually to do various things. And you can hire zookeepers where you draw empty circles. The zookeepers are ready to tame an animal. You can draw an enclosure. You draw pens so that your animal can go in it, or you can get an animal into your zoo, which requires a certain number of zookeepers to be able to handle that animal, and then just add it somewhere on your board. And you get the most diverse sets of animals in a bunch of pens to win. It's a bunch of points scored in various ways. The comparison to Roar and Write is that you are making pens and you're putting animals in those pens and you need to protect against their threats, basically. There's a lot more to Roar and Write, like a ton more, but this has like a little premise for $4 US, $6 Canadian to get the PDF and all you can print. If you are a fan of roll and writes, I think it might be worth checking out. Maybe you don't pull the trigger on it, but I think it might be worth checking out. So if you are interested, that finishes Monday, June 6th at 9:04 a.m. And speaking of really easy to understand Kickstarter videos, well, we've got Trailblazer, Travel the John Muir Trail, which is the opposite of that. Artemis Project? Excuse me. I'll take another Artemis Project, please. It's not that bad. It just makes my eyes glaze over a little bit as they rattle off the different mechanics that you can do on your turn in an attempt to justify the theme. Ah yes, the resources that you collect are actually what you can see. So you need to put all of these things that you can see together to get one of these beautiful scenes and vistas. Except you can carry over the resources. So have I just seen a river and now I can comprehend the beauty of this trail? Of course that's it. That's the funnier way. We found it. I take it all back. The theme is 100% great with this one. And this is a game where the point of the game is to get the most points, to have the best, most glorious journey after 12 days of hiking. You'll have 12 rounds to get to the end of the trail and have the most memorable day. Because if you don't get to the end of the trail, well, you're off in the wilderness somewhere and we're all going home after our hike. But otherwise, this is a sort of standard worker placement game. And that's hard to realize through the campaign page. When you read through the rulebook, you will realize that these action tokens aren't actually action tokens as you might understand them to be, or at least I understand them to be, but they are workers that you put out and you do the action listed on the board. And most spots only allow one person to go there and get stuff. So you'll do that over the course of 12 rounds. You'll have a sunrise phase where you see what the weather's like, which might make traveling along the trail a little bit more difficult. Then you have the actions phase where you do the actions. Then you have the, upkeep phase where you have to feed and water yourself. So what sorts of things can you do in the action phase? You can play the resources on stunning vistas to collect those and get points at the end of the game. You can use your resources to travel a part of the trail. The trail is comprised of 10 spots and you can only travel 1 per day. So there'll be 2 days where you don't have to travel, but any other time you will have to travel. So it's kind of about timing when you take your breaks, when you travel, how you can get the resources to travel, because everybody's travel path requires different resources as well, which I think is cool. And then you can get additional stuff to fill your backpack. They look like merit badges to me, and I like to think of them as merit badges. But then I also like to think of it that, yes, that seal did drop a Swiss Army knife at your feet, and you did put it into your backpack and continued along your merry way. I'm getting into this mechanics rambly sort of thing. When it boils down to it, it's a game of getting stuff, spending that stuff on stuff to get points, and being the most efficient with your resources as possible. It's $59 US or $76 Canadian, plus $12 shipping to the US, $20 shipping to Canada. So after conversion, again, this is over that $100 bar for me, and so it then isn't something that I'm necessarily interested in for that price point. But if you're interested, check it out. That finishes next Tuesday, June 7th at 7:56 a.m. Next up, we have Hunters of the Lost Creatures. And Hunters of the Lost Creatures is a game that I've done a full review on. They sent me a review copy of this game. So if you want to hear my full thoughts on it, well, stick around because it's very short. And I'll probably end up rehashing what I said in the full review itself. They describe it very well in their video as a game of stubbornness versus haphazardness. It is the miso soup card from Sushi Go party, and that's what made me want to cover it, because there'll be 4 locations and you have 4 different types of hunters, and you put a hunter down and you're going to go to that location, and if nobody else goes to that location, you get the thing. If anyone else goes there, nobody gets that thing. And so when there's a 10-point bird and a 1-point bird that's up, obviously you want the 10-point bird, so we're all going to go to the pink area. But I know everyone's going to the pink area, and so, yeah, sure, I might as well play the green card and go to the green area and get a 3-point dog or whatever. And then everyone reveals their cards and they all play pink and I played green and I'm the only one who gets points for that round. You continue over and over until all the cards are gone. And it's fun. What you see is what you get. If that sounds like a game that would interest your group and be a good filler and not overstay its welcome, then check it out. It's €18 or $25 Canadian, and then plus shipping for me to get to Canada would be an additional €12. So if I didn't own it, because I still have the preview copy that they sent to me, I'd say I'd have to be pretty drawn in by the concept to spend $40 on it. And for my group who doesn't play a lot of these fillers, I wouldn't get it. It's too expensive after the shipping. But if you live in Germany, the shipping's great. The EU might be a little bit more reasonable. This is also the type of game that I wish was at that sort of $20 Canadian level instead of the $25 Canadian. But it's also smaller print runs, smaller publisher. They're not going to be able to have the scale, the economy of scale that a lot of larger other things can do. So get it. If you're interested in the concept and you like the art and you feel like supporting a small publisher, get it. But also I recognize it might be too expensive, and I think that's okay. They're doing really well in their funding, so I don't think me saying these thoughts about what a big stack of cards should cost will hurt them that much. And I'm thrilled that it's resonating with so many people. So if you are interested in that, check it out. That's June 7th at 1 p.m. And then finally, we have the game Steel Colloseum, which is basically the board game version of Robot Wars. And even if you remember what Robot Wars was, or if you don't, that shouldn't stop you from going to YouTube. Well, you're on YouTube right now. Step number 1 finished, typing in Robot Wars, leaving this video. I completely understand. Go watch 7 hours of Robot Wars and come back, because it is probably the most quality entertainment ever created. That is what I call a day well spent. So you think the flippers would be the best, but the spinning blade is also pretty good. And I'm going to do you all a disservice, but this game not a disservice, by just playing Robot Wars up there while I finish this segment to get you all hyped and make you think that you want this game so you can live out your Robot War fantasy. How can you get more hyped than this? When was the last time something got you this excited? Huh?
Hey, Punisher, that was about the last time I washed my socks.
Oh, Punisher. So a very long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But gameplay-wise, this is Giant Killer Robots meets Robo Rally. It is a 2 versus 2 team game where you will all simultaneously play a card, and that card will have a speed value and sort of a battle maneuver on it. And whoever's the quickest gets to activate first and do that battle pattern, etc. And you're going to keep doing this, maneuvering your robots, attacking in different patterns, and hoping you don't get scrapped. And the neat thing about this game is that there's going to be a little bit of an intermission of sorts. You're going to have 3 rounds, and every time you take damage, a piece of scrap falls onto the arena. And so if you pick up those scraps, you can use that scrap as like a currency to purchase upgrades for your robots later on down the line. Anyway, this one's £40 or $65 Canadian. Really only viable shipping to the UK at £7. It's like $20 shipping to the US, and to Canada, it's not listed, so I'm assuming that falls into the rest of the world at $40 shipping, which is way too much for this thing. But if you're interested, check it out. That also finishes next Tuesday at that time. Right there. And that's it. We have finally arrived at the end of the week. Honestly, if you made it till here, let me know. I want to appreciate you. I want to say your names before I go to sleep. This may have been a rough one, and not a whole lot to talk about. But every week, I still have to do a pick for me and a pick for you. And I just learned that I really have to be cutthroat about these recommendations. Not that I wasn't being necessarily cutthroat already, but my mother watches these videos, and she said she had her first Kickstarter experience thanks to me. and that I will be receiving a mystery game at my door, and to tell her what games I receive so that she can take credit for one of them and not it just being a publisher sending me something. She was also very upset at Kickstarter that they wouldn't let her tell them that Room and Board sent me. So hey, speaking of that, if I ever do put you onto something that you didn't know about before, or convince you to back or whatever, drop it in the comments on Kickstarter that, hey, Room and Board sent ya. Because I've seen a few of you do that in various campaigns, and I'm incredibly appreciative, and it just kind of feels cool. But also because likely I then said good things that convinced you it was a worthwhile decision, and the publisher can then find this video and potentially use that for their own marketing or whatever. Plus, the Kickstarter will like it because more comments on Kickstarter means a higher rating on KickTrack, so everybody wins. Anyway, my mother bought me something. I'm fairly certain I know what it is. She didn't even buy a pick for me. She bought a pick for you. By a Canadian designer in the last few months. And so that narrows it down pretty significantly. But yeah, I do legitimately have a pick for me and a pick for you this week. Stuff that I'm excited about. Pick for me, there's obviously the Artemis Project, just the base game. That system feels really neat and really intrigued me. And it is something that I'm quite interested in trying out because I think it would gel pretty well with me. But then again, I also know that it is going to be mean, and I will be mean to people in it, and no one will want to play with me after it. So it may have a very short shelf life, meaning I should get it on the secondhand market. But yeah, Artemis Project, there's something about the mechanics in it that speak to me. I hope it is as great in translation as it appears to be. I am hyped about dice placement. I like dice placement. How your workers are variable and they are randomized, and then you have to figure out what to do with them. It's the same reason why I do like Castles of Burgundy. I think it's a good game. So Artemis Project gives me those vibes. That's my pick for me, is just plain Artemis Project. And then my pick for you is going to be Resist. Resist the power. Resist against everything. No, just the board game. Resist in whatever way that you want to resist. Delete Twitter! I think the system of Resist actually looks really interesting. I think you're going to get a lot of variability with the various missions and the various Maquis spies that you can use, and having that draft at the beginning does feel really fun in terms of constructing your deck. You'll always pick some of them, I assume. Or maybe you won't. Maybe they are of similar skill level that you'll switch things up and you'll find that you want to use things over and over. I don't know, but I think if you're a solo gamer, that one is worth looking into for sure. And let me know what you think about it. Let me know if it appeals to you, all you solo gamers out there, if it looks neat enough to earn a spot on your solo game time, because I know there's a lot of good solo games out there. That's the board game tournament, our deathmatch bracket recap, that has been doing the best just in terms of view count. So I am interested. I'm interested if it draws you in a similar way. The campaign is a little dense to get through and doesn't help that much in terms of really holding your hand, but when you look into it a little bit more, it feels, at least to me, like it's fun. Some of the videos, not by them, but by other people, are quite good on that one. So that's what I would recommend checking out if you are interested in checking out that campaign. Anyway, thanks for being here. Really, truly, I mean it. I appreciate you all immensely. And I hope this one wasn't more manic, or not too much more manic than my crowdfunding countdowns usually are. As always, again, let me know what you're excited for and what's upcoming, either upcoming or this week, in the comments. And my name's Chris George, and I don't have a catchphrase. Year 2, still no clue. But we might get there eventually. See you in the next one.